And you're going to start hearing more, 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 more.
Amy
So.
doesn't blame us. She would be doing the same thing if she were over here.
So we're
we
recording?
served with her.
We're back on the record. Next, we have the health department. Let's get to it.
Okay, for the health department, again, we start with the 2022 revised 1Q budget. Add in the general obligation bond debt schedule changes, the salary and benefit adjustments. Again, this is continuation, although this is a negative number compared to the positive numbers that we have been seeing. This is not cutting any positions, and this is not anybody going away. This is just the natural vacancy of people leaving and the changing of steps. And again, this still includes any collective bargaining agreement requirements that we have. So for the health department, it did result in a reduction of basically $140,000. The next item is a contractually obligated increase for our animal care and control contract, $76,000. And then this is the health department's, as we discussed before, just kind of their fleet adjustment as we realign the costs through the municipality and the departments. That gets us to the continuation level budget. And then you'll see here that we're going to adjust the homeless coordinator position. It was previously budgeted as a part-time position, and we are now budgeting as a full-time position.
Ms. Haltel.
Thank you. So I understand the idea about just kind of natural attrition. So then people might be hired that are new, that come in at a lower salary range. I'm still reluctant to cut any salary money from the health department. I just wanted you to know that. I think the health department spent a long time rebuilding itself, and any cuts to the health department are always going to give me pause, because it is, frankly, the most diversified department within the municipality that's asked to do so much. My question probably to Ms. Rash is do we know the vacancy factor for the health department right now?
Through the chair, Ms. Salatel, we have, since the beginning of January to current, we have reduced our workforce by a third, but I don't have the exact number as of today.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. I'd be interested to know kind of where we're settling out moving into 23 and what ways we could assist in making sure you can get the workforce, because a third reduction of workforce over the course of a year is a huge reduction. Thanks.
So,
Of the health department?
yeah, I was going to say,
Third in the whole department?
you said we reduced, which is an active statement. I want to make sure I understand. It was an intentional reduction, or you had workforce challenges that have caused a reduction of a third?
It's 'cause everyone quit.
Right. I just want to make sure we're really clear.
Yes, thank you. So the staff have left, but we still have those positions with us.
Okay, thanks.
And we are actively recruiting all of those positions,
Understood.
but with the workforce.
It was just a little bit of a bird issue for me. You know, we've reduced is slightly different than we've had a reduction because, and so,
My apologies.
no, it's okay. I just want to be clear.
And Mr. Chair, just to give you some context, so I have been working with Kim in the HR department to look at actual staffing numbers of the health department and kind of, so we're getting that snapshot. We're happy to share that with you, but I will tell you, as you heard last week from the city attorney, the city attorney's office has seen almost a 20% reduction in staff. We've seen the IT department, it's very difficult to retain staff because frankly, we're not as competitive as other places. And we've seen the same issue. You'll see it when it comes to the municipal manager's budget. In risk management, we're having difficulty filling qualified positions in that. Parks and Rec this year, their seasonal workforce was somewhere between 50 and 70% of which they typically hire seasonally. So across the municipality, we're seeing it in departments from street maintenance. We haven't been able to get enough street snow plowers, people that have CDLs to drive. The school district is seeing a lot of the same issue. So this isn't isolated to one department. We are going to see this holistically across multiple departments.
It's a national issue. So I don't see the list of positions. Oh, is that it? Do we have the list of position changes in the budget?
Yeah, so there's, in the overview, we had that snapshot of the positions. And I don't believe that we reflected, there was any changes in the health department for
So
staffing.
that raises the question of the library social worker folks that we had created that I believe have been transferred to the health department. How is that reflected?
That's in the alcohol tax. You're jumping ahead of slide.
Okay, thank you.
But if there's any other questions on the operating side before we move ahead? Okay, so then this is where we would get into the alcohol tax. So what you'll notice is, again, we have the reduction of the one-time funded items from the 2022 budget. What you'll notice is that with the direct grant to STAR, we added that back in as the proposed, seeing the value in making sure that they have funding along with the Victims for Justice and the other away. So then what you'll notice in the homelessness section, line 13, that's where you'll see the transfer of the community resource coordinator and the assistant resource coordinators from the library. So when we get to the libraries department, you'll notice is that same reduction from them. So this is that transfer of that program from the library to the health department. The other transfer in that we're seeing on this one is the Home for Good / Pay for Success program. The continuation of that program, but what we're reflecting is it in the health department this year instead of the CFO's office, because what we realized is that the health department is the one that's actually managing that program. And for some reason, it was just being depicted in the CFO's portion of that. So we're realigning that to reflect who's actually managing the program. So otherwise, the rest of the programs are continuation from 2022.
Ms. Altel.
Thank you. So for those community resource coordinators, I'm not necessarily opposed to moving to the health department, but is the intention to keep them physically located at the library doing the same kind of work?
Through the chair to Ms. Salatel. So they will just have a touchdown base here at the health department, but would be out in the community for most of their days. So in case they need to meet with their supervisor or have a space to just talk, it would be at the health department. It's kind of what we're looking at right now.
So you said out in the community, that's not necessarily at the library. And what we know is there's a large amount of utilization of the library by people who are seeking assistance by these individuals. So I guess, will they be primarily during their time in the community dedicated to our libraries?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think I would just add that that's a similar concern that I share, that the library is just such a perfect location. There's so many people there. There's whole floors of people in need. And so having a response there is good. So thank you for keeping them there.
I have one more, I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Altel.
On Home for Good, this is just to put in a plug. It'd be great to get a briefing on how we're getting to our performance payments. I'm kind of curious how it went in 2022 and why we're projecting the performance payment, into 23 being 1.8 million, because it is performance-based. Thanks.
Can I ask
Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
about Home for Good? I thought in the last budget, we did have a line item for Home for Good. Was it just that we didn't owe the money yet last year? And
So
sorry, you probably said this. I'm like offline. And
no, you're fine. It was in the CFO's office and there was a line, but we do have a contractual obligation. So I think it's a 3 or 4 year contract that was signed originally. So you'll see this at least for that long while we have that continuation of the contract. And then once that contract is done, evaluation and possible, what to do with that program after that.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, so the CFO line for Home for Good is more about operational kind of.
This is a movement. So what you'll see on the
it moved.
CFOs is going to be a reduction of the 1.8.
Okay,
And so
got it. It
it's
just moved.
Yep, we're just moving it
That
because
makes sense.
the health department actually administers the program. So it makes more sense for them
Yeah.
to.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. And then to Meg's point, it would be great to have, I know we have too many meetings and we never have time, but to have an update on Home for Good, because that was something that we were all, really oh yeah, health policy, great idea, really interested in. And, I think we finalized it while I was in the mayor role. We were all really supportive. And so, but yeah, it's kind of like, oh, what's going on with that program? And for the new members, they might not be familiar with it because it's a great program.
And I might offer that could be joint meeting, health policy and budget and finance, because it's a unique project in which there is a substantial financial component to it that is the basis of its success. And so I think both would be wise. Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the operation and how it's working.
Let's do it at HPC, and then we'll get people to come to HPC.
Okay.
Because it's really one of the best committees, in my opinion, but sometimes it has low attendance.
That
Kind of
might-
like the health department's one of the most important things we do, but we're trying to cut costs when we can't hire people already. It's sort of a societal issue, I think.
It
But
might
anyway,
be one of the best committees because no one shows up.
definitely exhibit E of me wasting time. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, proceed.
Okay, that was the health department. And since we already took our break, we can roll right into the library.
I'll just reassert
Unless we
that
have-
the health department,
too fast.
we do believe is a plank of our EMS and public safety system. So want to keep that rubric on the table for people to understand. Ms. Alatal.
Thank you. And this might be covered in the capital budgets, but I would really like an update or a conversation about the health department's building. It continues to be an ongoing challenge. So I just want to make sure that we cover it when we hit capital budgets, because I don't see any bonding right now for this department. So just something to talk about. Thanks.
So there is not one in any of the other departments either for the health department. But I think we agree is that there are significant challenges in that. And the maintenance and operations department will tell you is they spend a lot of time there. But I think that it kind of goes to the conversation that we had about the AFD shop is that, what is that balance of, the cost to repair the building that is there compared to doing something else, and the overarching evaluation of that. So all right, are we on to the library? Okay, and we have the library director, Ms. Domboski, here with us.
Technically speaking, the municipal manager administering the duties of the library director.
Yes, that. Yeah. So we start with the 2022 revised budget, 1Q budget. We do have a debt service for the automated material handling system. There was a loan that was taken out when that system was purchased. And so this is the payment for that as part of their budget. The salary and benefit adjustments for the library, again, this is the continuation of the current staffing level at what we would call next year's cost, the ins and outs of the employees and those adjustments, and then the slight fleet adjustment for their mix of the vehicles in the fleet department. So, and there are no 2023 proposed requests.
Thank you. Go ahead, Felix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is around operating hours for the library. So what does this budget do in terms of operating hours, and specifically around Sunday?
Through the chair, Mr. Rivera, it keeps the hours the same as they are right now. There is no operational change.
Okay. Could the administration provide me with budget figures on bringing back the operational hours, please, for the library as it used to be?
Through the chair, Mr. Rivera, we're happy to provide you that. But I would say, too, one of the biggest issues is staffing. It's like every other department. If you don't have the staff to maintain it, that's one of the biggest problems. So even if we add it, if we're not able to fill those staff positions, I just don't want to give you a false hope that it might change. My hope is we can fill the positions that we budget. But we're seeing in other departments, it's just been very difficult in this market.
You okay? Or go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up to that is, if there is, I understand and respect concerns around staffing. If there's some type of system where maybe we're open for a few hours on Sunday rather than perhaps the former hours that they were operated on Sunday. Just something that we can do with the current staffing system that would be helpful. So if there's various options that can be provided to me budgetary wise, that would be great.
And I think Meg wants to be in the queue. If I can just quickly ask when the library director, we've seen some things online that I think she's getting started, but I don't know when. Can you give us an update?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Virginia McClure, the new library director, I believe she's supposed to be starting the 17th of October. So I think on Monday, that's the expectation. That's the last I saw. So we're very excited to have her rejoin the Anchorage Public Library system.
Great. And just from my perspective, I've heard really good things about her. So that's great. Go ahead, Ms. Alatel.
Thanks. I just wanted to note, based on Mr. Rivera's question, we didn't actually have any staffing position reductions when we had to lead to the Sunday closures. So it's mainly getting up to that staffing percentage. And I guess that's the refinement on the question, I think, from Mr. Rivera is, can we figure out what's the delta on the number of staff we need to get in that are not currently in, so that we can figure that out, and maybe there could be some conversation about ways to make those positions more attractive or something. I don't know the answer, but I think that's the piece of information I'm missing. Thanks.
Great. Go ahead, Jamie.
Thank you, Felix. Do you think it's possible to get the number of individuals that in the past, if we have a some sort of system to do it, to find out who is actually uses and utilizes the libraries on a Sunday versus 5 people versus 200? I mean, because that could be something very relevant on how much staff we need to, and if it's even worth it. Are we losing money?
Absolutely. I think the library does take utilization numbers so they can see how many people are coming in on Sunday versus other days of the weeks. And the initial intent here was because staffing positions were sometimes challenging for, we looked at the higher utilization dates, and that's why staff was shifted to those dates. So, I mean, that was a consideration, and I can certainly get you those numbers.
Okay, the next slide will be the library alcohol tax slide. And so what you'll notice is that it's the continuation of the early literacy specialist inside of the library. And then this is where we see the transfer of the community resource coordinator and assistant resource coordinator positions to the health department.
Go ahead, Meg.
Thanks. So the alcohol tax required performance metrics. So I'm curious when we'll be able to get a report on kind of what the early literacy specialist has been up to, and kind of how that's going, because the whole premise of the alcohol tax was it was going to be somewhat, evidence-based, or we were going to have an evaluation tool. So partly we just haven't been good about keeping that up on that, particularly when it's within the MOA, but I think it's a good idea to start to figure out kind of the route for that. Thanks.
Okay. Suzanne is trying to get in the queue. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was, it's really echoing, so it's hard for me to speak. I think I was back on the last slide with, I'm sorry, I'm just going to put myself out of the queue, Austin. I just can't hear.
All of us who call in
Thank
frequently completely understand. Felix and Jamie and I are nodding because every single time we call in that happens, and it's extremely distracting. So we get it. Usually Desiree is able to fix it. So, is it okay now?
Actually, it seems to sort of have stopped. Yeah.
She fixed it. Let me turn my mic off. She says that's the key.
Okay. I was going to ask just about the staffing rate. Since 2021, there has been a reduction, and the number for 2023 proposed it's 62 and 27, which is a reduction from 2021 numbers. And so I wanted to ask about plans to increase staffing, and if we could get some data on how many employees have left in the number of years, the rate of attrition, and in what positions. And also wanted to stress that I continue to hear from constituents about the importance of the Sunday hours, and would just ask the administration, to find a way to make that work. But again, if we could get some data concerning staffing and attrition and where, and then I'll follow up in writing with some specific questions regarding the library in Girdwood. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the question. I think we have no problem doing that. I think just like with the health department, I am going to be asking the HR department to go through and kind of give us holistic numbers for each department by department, because I think this issue is far more substantial than one department. One department or two departments might get our attention because constituents call us or tell us. But I think for the assembly to see the holistic issue that we're dealing with staffing citywide, I think would be very helpful. So I will get you that information, and I think I'll have it broken down for you department by department, so we can have a much bigger, robust discussion about that. Hopefully that's helpful to you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Meg.
Thanks. Could you also break that down on rep versus non-rep employees? Because I think that that's important as we consider, labor guidance versus exec positions, et cetera.
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, and we will move on to the municipal managers department now. Again, we start with the 2022 revised budget, changes for the debt service on the general obligation bonds and the performing arts bond. The salary changes inside of this department. Again, this is the ins and outs of employees and those wage increases. The workers' compensation claims and the professional service cost increases, both of those are for the workers' comp and general liability fund. And then the fleet adjustment for the realignment across the municipality. And again, this is the contractual obligation. So with the room tax increase comes contract payments that we have to make. And so this is the increased portion of that, which gets us to the continuation level budget. And next, what you'll see is the implementation of a safety program to include a new safety officer. And then the reduction of labor time for charging to grant funds. So this is the administration of the ARPA funds.
Would you like me to explain? Okay, so I appreciate this opportunity. I've had much of this discussion with assembly leadership, and this is something that I thought would be ripe for actually a work session. As many of you may recall, I'm going to focus first on the safety program. As many of you may recall, when I was relatively new, OSHA walked into my office and said, "We're from OSHA, we're here to inspect." And so what we found over the course of many, many, many years, the municipality has received numerous fines from OSHA. And because some of these fines were repetitive, we were assessed earlier this year with, frankly, hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines from OSHA. We were able to mitigate those fines, and we entered into an agreement with OSHA whereby we would do certain things. One thing is we would have a third party come in, and that third party would go through and evaluate the municipality's safety program, look at our assets, look at what we're doing, what we're not doing. And through that, we would implement increased activity around safety. But one of the keys here is the municipality has never had a cohesive, overarching, effective safety program. So I hired a safety officer. Safety used to be housed within risk. What I did in order to get the level of expertise we needed, it could no longer be in risk. So I brought it over directly into the municipal manager's office. And Kelly Carruthers is her name. She's the new municipality safety officer. And we were very fortunate because she used to work for ACOSH. That's Alaska OSHA. So we are implementing that safety program. She's going through diligently through maintenance and operation, through the fire department, the police department, Parks and Rec, everybody. And she is looking at their safety programs, looking at their violations, looking at the repeat violations that have happened over the course of numerous years. And we're getting the municipality back on track. We believe that by instituting this program, first of all, we really don't have an option. We have to have a robust safety program because Alaska OSHA is effectively requiring it. But in order to do this, I mean, it's far more effective and safe for our employees to have a robust safety program versus people getting hurt or paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. So that's why you're seeing this safety program. I'm happy to have, for any assembly member who would like to dive deeper into this, I'm happy to either have those conversations one-on-one or have a work session to kind of go through what those fines were and what we're doing to address those. So that's what the safety program is. The reduction of labor charge time for grant administration. So the ARPA grants previously were being administered by Portia Erickson, who was in the mayor's office. We've transferred that a position over from the mayor's office to the manager's office, and half of that work is now being done by Lindsay Causer in the manager's office. And so we're able to charge part of her PCN to this ARPA because she's the one that's doing the grant administration for that. So those are really the two changes that you're seeing in my office, but you will see obviously the 2023 proposed change for the safety program is the most robust outside of the contractual things that we can't control. We can't control the workers' comp claims necessarily. We can't control the professional services contract increase for risk management. I will just give you a little preview of what you're going to see on the next assembly meeting. Again, risk management is one of those departments that is seeing challenges getting licensed time loss people for workman's comp claims. We've had a position we've been trying to fill for many months, and we haven't been able to. So in order to keep our workers' comp claims going and getting our employees taken care of financially when they have these injuries, we've been having to contract with an outside entity. Northern Adjusters is who we've been using for years. So those professional services have increased simply because we can't hire the licensed staff in order to process these claims. So we're having to go to a third party. So that's it. I'll wait for questions because I'm sure there's a few.
Yeah, thanks for that, Amy. Kevin has a question.
Well, less of a question, more of a statement. It's ironic that you should bring this up because just earlier this week, I was speaking with some contractors and with some CDC business, and they were talking about that there's been a significant increase in the number of OSHA investigations and sightings in the last couple of months, and not just a small increase, but a dramatic increase. So I think that goes to say that it's not that we have dangerous employees here that are doing anything. That I think probably on a federal level, there's been a whether it's quota driven or whether it's being driven from the top down to dramatically increase the investigations and parking and on-site presence. And so, contractors get used to doing business a certain way. And now OSHA has decided to be much more aggressive in their pursuit of infractions. Maybe that's they want more money, or maybe that's just that they've got behind and they're trying to catch up. But I think it's a reality that we are going to continue to see pretty heavy enforcing by OSHA. At least that's the new policy. So thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Amy, can you explain to me why the room tax, I'm confused about the room tax line. Room tax is revenue, but are you spending that amount of room? Okay.
Well, sort of, and Courtney may have to help me on this. So this is not something we necessarily have control over. This is contractually obligated. So as we bring in more revenue through the room tax lines, there's certain people like Civic Ventures that get more of that money. So that's what you're seeing here.
So it's a pass-through.
This is a pass-through.
Okay, great.
Ms. Alatal?
Thanks. Amy, you said that this was the safety program and safety officer was a move over from risk. So is this a position that's coming out of that department and then into your department? Will we see a concurrent reduction elsewhere?
You technically won't, because risk is technically in my department.
So
Risk is a division within the municipal manager's office. So you're not going to see department by department lines. So risk management, OEM, those are all parts already of the manager's office. So they're already in my budget. What I've done though, I've taken that position out of that division within the manager's office, and I've brought it directly into the manager's office, simply because I'll just be candid. The level at which I needed for expertise in this, I can't put it under somebody who is paid less.
So that still seems to me that you wouldn't need to add a position. I'm missing something.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should be clear. So I'm not actually adding a position necessarily. I'm reclassifying the position and I've upclassed it. So
Got it.
the previous position was at a much lower range, or it was at a lower range. And so what I wanted to reflect here, I wanted to capture the full cost of the program. We're talking education. We're talking, boots and jackets and all those things that go with a safety program, and the increased cost of this PCN. So that's all being captured in that one line item.
And you indicated someone was already in this position. How are you paying for it this year?
So I will tell you, we've had vacancies in that position. And remember, this position, even though it's being paid for more, it was already a position that existed. So we've had vacancies within risk management. So we had the labor budget for it. We just shifted around how it was being implemented. But again, I just want to reemphasize, when we dealt with OSHA, and we went through this, we don't have an option. We have to fix the things OSHA told us to fix. And so we know by having a robust safety program, it'll be cheaper for us to do it this way. And frankly, it's safer for our employees versus not having a safety program and people getting hurt and then paying higher workman's comp claims. My goal is, as the Assembly watches this program develop, what you'll see is if we're effective in having a good safety program, you'll see our amount of worker comp claims go down. And, frankly, we won't have fees and violations. The other thing, if we decide to have a more robust discussion about this, we can dig deep into what fines and what departments were assessed the most by OSHA and where we're making headway. I'm happy to have those conversations with you.
Thanks for the clarification. I want to be involved in that a little bit. Partly, I would love to set some strategic goals, for reductions. I mean, I think it could be money really well spent as long as we're staying informed and staying on top of it and really looking at where to deploy the opportunity. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything else?
We can move on.
Thanks.
We'll have Parks and Rec Director come up and join us while we go through these slides. So I think what you're going to see, again, for the very top section of this, and without repeating myself 26 times, I'll try to very briefly go through. We have the change in the debt service, again, the general obligation bond debt and our tax anticipation notes, the change in salary and benefits for Parks and Rec employees staying with the same position count. They annually evaluate their operational needs, and when they can adjust some of those seasonal positions to full-time, they will do that as they see the needs arise. So that's what you'll see in those position lines. Fuel cost increases, again, this is something we've been talking about, I think, for a little while. Their portion of the fleet adjustment, the realignment throughout the municipality, and then again, this is the room tax. Again, this is the pass-through, the same thing that happened in the municipal manager's office. For the 2023 proposed changes, this is the implementation of the prior year voter approved bond O&M. So this is just the O&M from prior years being implemented in 2023 for projects that were already completed. And then this reflects the Girdwood Board of Supervisors requested budget changes. And so for their Parks and Rec area, they're requesting a reduction of just under $14,000.
Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
Thank you. Thanks, Courtney. So can you help me understand this chart, or the way you've organized it in general? Like, it says salaries and benefits adjustments, which, by the way, I have no problem with more money going towards salary and benefits, so that's not the issue at all. But I thought there were no additional positions, but then it says 2 in the FT, which I assume is 2 additional full-time positions.
So what they do is they evaluate their seasonal positions and what seasonal positions they need, and if they can kind of combine some seasonal positions and
swap.
make them,
Okay.
make them full-time.
Hence the
reduction
reduction
in
of
the,
the
yep,
7. Okay,
yep,
got
yep.
it.
And so that's just the
Should have
offsetting
figured that
of
out.
they,
Thank
yep,
you.
they combined the cost of some seasonal positions to make full-time positions that then fulfill their operational needs.
Cool.
Yep.
So, Mr. Braniff, what are your thoughts on the future of the department? We have a divide that's kind of just becoming a practical reality that you're the homeless cleanup department. But that's not the aspiration of the Parks and Rec department. And so where are we going as a department in the context of vision of a bright, healthy green spaces for our community and a place where the public is happy and healthy to be in?
I think that to some extent this year was a departure from what the Healthy Spaces work group had done in the past, which is really cleaning up public spaces that are affected by the population of individuals experiencing homelessness. A lot of that probably driven by the Centennial Campground. I think as we look to the future, the work group will continue to clean camps that APD abates and clean public spaces where we see commonly, trash and carts left behind that we can clean up and make public spaces better. But I think a return to what it was prior is what I envision. So.
I wouldn't argue that the shift happened because of Centennial Park. I would argue that that shift has been kind of a slow and steady burn on the department and its focus for probably the last 7 years, and not because it wasn't necessary. It was necessary because somebody has to do that work. But what is that work? Getting back to the old, philosophically, where are we going to go? What's our budget going to drive us towards in terms of that other side of the equation?
Sure. Well, I think, traditionally we've measured the success in the department, with metrics that are really built around weight and number of sites cleaned and affected. We measure it in GIS, both the locations and the weight that we haul away.
I'm going to interrupt you. Sorry.
Sure.
What I mean is,
Am I off?
yeah, separate
Okay.
and beyond this focus that's become a driving factor of the department, which is cleaning up and, doing all of that important work. What about all the other work that is vital to this city and its public spaces, which is your planning, your growth, your expansion, your transformation of parks, your making spaces more for the general public as well? That's the part that I would like to hear a little bit about, because if I'm around for another 3 years, I'm going to start beating a drum of that work, because that work is arguably more important. The other is critical, it's existential, but we have vision and aspiration that we also have to pay some heed to.
Sure. I think I understand the question better, and thanks for clarifying. I think part of it comes down to my focus, and my focus is it's inherently, I think, where it's always been as I transition from my old position into this new one. And I'd worked, basically with Healthy Spaces and cleaning up all over Anchorage, from the population that's experiencing homelessness. There's a learning curve, and so much of what we do in terms of bidding and construction and reaching out to the community and understanding the community's needs. I think we have an amazing team, and we'll continue to try to fill a couple of vacant positions going forward with slightly re-envisioned, because they'll become new positions. But I think that's where more of my focus will be. And we'll get back to just sort of simplifying what we do in terms of the police abate and we clean up behind them, and that work group requires less attention. Does that speak to a little better?
I think maybe I'll bend your ear offline at some point, but what I'm really hoping to start to hear more of out of the Parks and Rec department is these exciting new plans and proposals for beautification of areas. Like the Takatnu project was such an exciting and amazing thing, not Takatnu, Chanchnu. And what are some of the kind of areas of positive growth? And so we don't need to get into that now. I can look more for that later.
Okay.
I know you have a whole team of people doing that aspirational work, but all we ever hear about right now, because of reality, is that other job.
Sure. Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I think that the real big projects we have coming up are probably AMAT's projects where we're getting roughly a 10-to-1 match, federal match on the local money that we contribute. The Fish Creek Trail to the ocean, the Ship Creek Trail to the coastal trail, and perhaps one other going forward. So
That's perfect. See, and it's hard even to think about those things because spending so much time on the other one, right? And so that's
Sure.
evidence that there's work to be done.
okay.
So I would love to see a position in the Parks Department specifically around placemaking, dedicated to figuring out how we can do light, quick, cheap activation of spaces. Active spaces are safer spaces. I think it gets a little bit to what Chris is saying. Can I task you with coming up with what that might cost? Or if you have someone in one of these new positions that would maybe be suited to that, because I think for my purposes, and I'm very much more an urban person than outdoors person, I would love to see a lot of activation of our spaces in ways maybe we haven't imagined before, in ways that we could try to pilot and think creatively, and then work, if it's working, work throughout the year or the following year to see if there's any grants for this type of thing, because we do know there are grants for this type of thing. So thoughts, feedback?
Sure. Are there particular parks or areas that you have in mind as you
I love
think
that
of
you
activation?
assume that I go to lots of parks and particular areas. Any of them. I think for me, the number one place, if I had a priority for activation, is actually on the trail. I don't like being on the trail by myself in large swaths because it's wooded. There could be a bear, a moose, a person. I don't know. But as I mentioned, the Katy Trail prior in Dallas, I think that there's just lots of opportunity. And if we could have someone in parks really looking at, sky's the limit. There's so much. And what I like about it is the idea of placemaking is it's light, quick, cheap. Those are the three key tenets, so that we can try lots of things. And then anything that we really, really like, we can maybe look to operationalize and make permanent. And so it's an experimental opportunity, but I think it's one that, you can hear me, I'm a little excited, but that could really generate some excitement about our public spaces and maybe in different ways. So if we can figure out what someone doing that job, maybe I'll have to apply. I don't know. But, I say that in jest, but, because it's such a cool opportunity. And so if we knew what that cost, I would be really interested in looking at that opportunity. Because I think to Mr. Constance's point, we really do need to focus on the positive and bring that energy.
Okay. Yeah. I think, to speak to that specifically, one of the projects we have going forward that we'll bond for next year is basically a revamping of Paratrovich Park on 4th Avenue, which is one of our challenged parks in terms of the activities that take place there, and building a park that I think is more accommodating to be activated, where I think that it doesn't necessarily push negative activities out, but I think it brings enough people in to where that activity isn't the predominant activity, and it really changes the tenor, I think, of just the experience of being in the park. I think within our department, we really have a superstar. I think a lot of you guys know him, our superintendent, Steve Rafuse. And maybe, what it comes down to in order to follow the vision you're putting forward is getting somebody additional that works under him that, specifically focuses on that type of work. So you're welcome.
All right. I have two more in the queue, Mr. Cross, Mr. Bond.
Yeah, and I like the idea of new parks, new ideas. What does that look like for the future? But I think the reality is that if we're struggling to maintain and keep the condition of our existing parks, adding more to that work burden has to be, we have to proceed cautiously. I would really like for another conversation to see what the cleanup plan is around our Midtown parks, because it is a constant battle. Every May when we do the citywide cleanup, I volunteer. I go to the worst parts, which is along Chester Creek and everything. I can tell you, when I take my kids on Chester Creek or along there, and they're like, look at all the bikes under the bridge, and they're more enamored by all the stuff that they see in the clutter than they are by nature. That should be a concern. And so, and the other concern is, do we add more parks just to see them fall into more disrepair? And and bathrooms that aren't open and things like that. And so, it's a big struggle that the Parks Department has regarding, maintenance and continuation, and then growing that is going to add maintenance to it. So conversation for another time, but it definitely has got to have a significant impact on the budget. Thank you.
Sure. I certainly agree that we have a lot of aging infrastructure, a lot of Project 80s infrastructure, and how do we maintain it? If it's, we bond for about $4 million a year historically. And is that enough to be able to just upkeep, what we have? I think with a lot of our new projects, capitalizing on some of this 10-to-1 federal funding that we're able to utilize through the AMATS program is really the sort of way that we're going to be able to do new projects, because it's very consumptive of dollars to keep up with our aging infrastructure. So.
And just a follow-up to that, maybe we're looking at it wrong. Maybe it's not the responsibility of the parks. Maybe we look at other attributes that we have that specialize in cleanup that should be looking into that, whether it's solid waste services or something like that, and deal with trash and debris, or maybe there's someone entirely. But some of those areas are pretty frightful, and I'm concerned that some of our waterways may be an environmental hazard if some of these things aren't addressed. So thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to back up my colleague, Member Zolotel. I'm very excited about placemaking, and I do have a couple ideas, but I have a couple ideas I think of things that are already kind of going on in that space, but could be future opportunities as well. As I understand placemaking, it's a very specific thing. It's sort of, number one, these are temporary projects, and they are the nexus of activity and then temporary structural or tangible physical things. An example that I love that kind of happens every winter, I'm not even sure who does this. I know it's not Parks and Rec, but somebody in Westchester Lagoon, they take that little circle, they bring a chainsaw out there, and then they have that moving platform with the sculpture in the middle. Has anybody gone out there? It's like a big New Year's thing now. It's probably, maybe people aren't supposed to be doing it, but it's really cool. I think a really cool project, you mentioned Paratrovich Park, but my colleague Meg is always challenging me to think outside of downtown. I got a little sassy email about that today, but no, gosh, no. I think it would be really cool to do a winter activation along Chester Creek trail, kind of going from downtown into Midtown, and do lighted sections of the trail. And you could even make it a contest where people can submit concepts and have their own little section of colored lights along the trail, things like that. So anyway, I would be happy to support that in concept. And I also think it brings in Member Cross's point about, it's great to want to expand parks, but it also, that comes with more maintenance. Whereas these temporary placemaking things perhaps don't. They are meant to be easily disassembled as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think I might have failed to communicate effectively. I wasn't suggesting what land is the Parks Department planning to buy and build on. Just, there's a focus we have right now that is practically solely on addressing abatement and cleanup. And if you think about the function of our parks are shared public spaces that are the place where neighbors can connect. And if we don't invest our time and effort in figuring out how to make those places attractive to our neighbors, they will be given over to uses of people who are willing to be there when no one else is. And so it's, the conversation is more what I'm thinking about, less than about, capital projects and investments. I don't know exactly how to put it into words. Some of this short-term and temporary placemaking, some park improvements that are essential that haven't been done for 25 to 30 years, that's ongoing. But celebrating those things and building those things, it's not necessarily this idea of building an acquisition and, expansion. Mr. Peterson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And when you were talking about lighting that trail, reminded me, we've got the City of Lights situation that happens every year, and maybe there's a way to connect lighting some of those trails with the City of Lights program. Just throwing that out there. Thanks.
All right. I think that's probably good. And the message there was pretty clear. I think that your job isn't the homeless cleanup department. You're the Parks and Rec department. So let's make sure we start to grow some of that. I mean, nobody knows really. They're the ones that produce all those beautiful flowers. What are they?
They know about the flowers.
Yeah, well, that's true. Some don't though. They weren't here for those debates. Like, they keep a greenhouse open that's amazing, and the rec centers, they do such good work. One last question on that: what's the status of the IT, the broadband connections to the rec centers we appropriated for?
Okay. Well, we would like to. It's $500,000 item that we would ultimately look to bond for in order to pay for. So
ARPA funded it. The money is there. The question is,
am I misunderstanding?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I will get you a status update.
okay, yeah, no, I was
Yeah,
at
no,
the
the money's
council.
already been appropriated.
Yeah, I was at a council meeting last night,
Yeah.
and the internet was crawling, and it was
So
exciting to think.
what it was for through ARPA, the assembly appropriated money to increase some of the broadband or some of the access and some of the rec centers.
I want our kids
We are,
in those
the
rec
director
centers.
is super excited to do this for you, Mr. Constant. He just forgot. Super excited, super.
Okay, thank you. I hate to dominate this. I love the parks. That's all. So
Can I ask a quick question that is really going to be
Please.
Exhibit F or whatever of how I'm not spending time wisely? We were just talking about the at Russian Jack. What is the greenhouse called there where you grow things and
Man Lizer Memorial Greenhouse.
okay, and the public can go there, right?
That's right.
You can just yeah.
We need to figure out how to market it a little
Yeah,
better.
because
It's
I've heard it's
unfortunately-
amazing, and I've never even been there. Someone said to me, like, "Yeah, I can't afford to go to Hawaii, so I just go to the gardens, every weekend." And like, that's a pretty good idea. Anyway,
I'd love to show it
would
to you.
be fun to do in the winter, like an assembly tour
Yeah.
of that spot, because I think a lot of us have not been.
I think that's when it's at its best. It's like you step into a different world. To step
Yeah,
into the
could-
tropical house. Yeah.
Cool.
In January.
Yeah, could we try? Will you help organize that? Maybe
Love
like
to.
in January or February. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
you bet.
Thanks.
so that exhibit AQD is exactly my point. There's so much good. We got to tell that story some more so people believe.
Okay.
You better walk away or they're gonna keep
Okay.
And now that
I'm
we
getting the hook here.
exhausted that we wanted him to do other things, we're on to the alcohol tax, of which it shows the continuation of the Healthy Spaces program though. So this is the continuation of those individuals and that program through the alcohol tax. We're not proposing any changes to that. All right. Okay. And then we have their capital project list here. We are proposing a bond just short of $2 million. That includes a mix of trails and parks. And then if you guys have any questions specifically to those projects for.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, this bond is about half of the park bond we usually pass. I think the people of Anchorage, how many years has it been since a park bond failed? Do you know?
We've passed 10 in a row successfully.
Yeah, and obviously the Park Foundation and a variety of other folks work hard to get public buy-in. And one of the ways we've done that is that we tend to have projects in different parts of town. And so here I see there's a Campbell Creek rehabilitation. I'm not sure where on Campbell Creek that is. There's a lot of different areas there. But everything else, I think, of the bond projects are either in downtown or maybe just west of downtown in West Anchorage. So I guess my question for you is, are there any worthwhile East Anchorage park projects that we could put on this bond?
I think the one thing that jumps top of mind is we've recently done a new master plan in Russian Jack Springs Park, which needs quite a bit of updating. It's aging infrastructure, it's the trails, the bridges, more so than the facility itself. Yeah, it's we could probably put $10 million into.
I don't think he meant to say 10 million.
Maybe I'm dreaming big.
He is dreaming.
We
but
could do $500 million in Fish Creek.
Sure.
I'm gonna have a stroke. So I will say East Anchorage has had some significant projects, whether it's the community garden or the new, what is that track thing you always call it?
The pump track at Chance New.
Yeah, Chance New
Building
has
a bridge at Chance New right
yeah,
now.
so as we look at Parks Bronze, when we decide what we're going to put on there, we look at not only what is for this year, but we look at previous years. And we've made some significant investments in East Anchorage recently. Beautiful, beautiful parks over there. And I think that that community garden, if you haven't been over there, you really should go over there because it's gorgeous. So I would say from the administration's perspective, we're not just looking at this year. We've looked at what have we done over the past few years. And I think East Anchorage has gotten a lot of love. And so we're looking right now, the mayor's put together things that he thought would be valuable for some of the other districts as well.
So can I follow up, Mr. Chair? So yeah, we invested $700,000 in East Anchorage last year, $500,000 to Chance New Muldoon, including the community garden, which I helped plant with a bunch of volunteers, a lot of volunteer labor into that. $200,000 into Russian Jack, also true. But there has been a ton of community investment, and we've also leveraged a ton of state and federal funding out there. And $700,000 in the context of a $3.9 million bond, I think it was last year. I don't think it was the top district. And I try to reiterate this, but there are 50,000 people in East Anchorage. It was the most populous district. I'm not sure if it still is now that North Anchorage has the new alignment. But I would urge folks to, particularly Russian Jack and Chance New Muldoon, which are regional parks that people from all over the city visit. I would urge us to continue, even if it's a small investment, continue investing in those parks. I'll tell you, Pete and I were at a Russian Jack Community Council meeting on Wednesday night, and there was members of the mountain bike community there. They are going to do, on their own, they are going to raise something like $200,000 and work with the community and put in some new bike paths in Russian Jack Springs, which is a massive park. They're going to be able to put in a whole little trail system without impacting much of the rest of the park. And again, these are destination parks that serve everyone, but you have 50,000 folks densely packed into East Anchorage. And I would urge the administration to reconsider not having any East Anchorage projects on this bond. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Davidson.
Okay, thanks. Don't worry, Amy, you can mellow out that heart attack. I don't think anyone's planning to put $10 million for that project on the bond. But again, acknowledging the awkwardness, and this is hard and we all know it and it's no one's fault, but is it possible for the Parks Department to put together a list of like the next 10 projects? I'm not saying we'd select all of those, but the next projects that are in the queue that you believe could either meet assembly goals or meet the Parks Department goals that maybe didn't make it on this bond, but if we were to have a little extra money, could.
Absolutely.
And try to get maybe a variety of neighborhoods so that it's more reflective of the community.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
If I might, I would just direct folks to the capital packet. And
Well,
there's
that's true.
the
It's just not
CIP.
Yeah.
There's a whole slate of projects for the next 5 years. And so I don't know that you need to generate any more because I do believe they're here in front of us. And so that's all anyhow. So
I think we can still provide you the list, and that way you'll get maybe a prioritization, because although they're in there, they're not necessarily prioritized by maybe what parks would want. And if that's beneficial, we can do that so that you'll at least see what
Perfect.
their next prioritized are.
Yeah, I think it's great for members to know if we had a little more money, this is what we could do. And maybe we choose not to do that based on the conversation about debt, et cetera, or maybe we choose to do it. I think Forrest Wright, park bonds pass. People love parks. we like what you're doing. So anyway.
So next, thank you. I have Mr. Rivera, and then I'm assuming Mr. Cross is trying to get in the queue.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So two things. First is I haven't looked at the CIB, but how is this the final year for the Campbell Creek Trail rehab, or are there still planning more years of that?
Campbell Creek Trail really, the trail rehab really rotates as we do it in sections. And when we get to one end, really, we start on another, and maybe there's a brief break. But there's also a large AMATS project in the pipeline in the near future to put the crossing over Lake Otis, where you have to use either kind of a sketchy road crossing or the old tunnel, which is inconveniently located. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess what I'm hearing is that there may be some continued years. I know that both Ms. Alatel and I have heard from constituents that they're sort of tired of all of the construction on the Campbell Creek Trail year after year after year. But they also appreciate all of the upgrades of the Campbell Creek Trail. They just want to be able to use it. So the second thing is on sort of speaking of possible projects to add on to the park bond. There is one project that Anchorage Skates, which my colleagues may remember as one of the very few groups in the municipality that pays us money. They give us a property tax equivalent check to the municipality. They have a project that I think is really exciting in Cuddy Family Park, and that is the idea of the Cuddy Park Chalet, which they have been working to get some state funding on. They have already funded $270,000 of projected total project cost of $1.56 million. So you may see Ms. Alatel and I try to see if we can help that project come to fruition by adding it into this bond, either maybe in phases or some other approach. So I just wanted to put that out there, and hopefully we can have a conversation with you before we vote in November. Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Cross?
Yeah, one, I was just looking for where the Chuyahill River Parks Department and their projects are listed in this, and perhaps they're somewhere deeper in this, so I can just familiarize myself with what was allocated. I mean, I know from the previous budget what we got in here, but where a discussion on that takes place. And then I have a follow-up question.
Sure. The essentially the projects that are done in Eagle River aren't bonded for. They're part of the mill rate, so they fund those differently. And they also have a significant fund balance that they accumulate that helps with large projects as they come up on us.
So they don't show up as a part. I'm familiar with how they're funded. I guess it doesn't come up under a Parks and Recreation item because it's funded differently. Because I would have expected to see some of those projects on the list to be discussed.
Yeah, actually, the maintenance shop on the Old Glen Highway, that is the new maintenance shop for Parks and Rec in Eagle River.
Okay.
But that's the lone item on this list.
All right. And I would love to get a parks tour. I mean, for me, the difficulty you have is when you see line items and these are our projects, if I don't have something visual to put together and say, this is the vision, then it just ends up being another name on a list of things that want funding, and they just get lost.
Sure.
So I think a parks tour would be spectacular. Anything to get us out of this room. Thank you.
I'd love nothing more. So, yeah.
Did you just mention the parks tour?
Yeah.
Annual parks tour. I see it happening.
Bring your
We
bicycle.
get some text.
Yeah.
Party bus. Yeah.
Bicycle.
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 You can stay home.
So I am not going to end this conversation here. One last question from me. The Beetle Kill project.
Yeah.
Where are we on that?
Yeah, so right now we're in the middle of spending the ARPA 1 funds. We mapped out how we'll use those funds in 2022 and 2023. We used barely any of them in 2021. That was just really the timing of it. And so as we work our way through the $3.5 million, right now, between the two contractors that we're utilizing and our own municipal crews, we're spending about $65,000 a week. And we've worked through some of the larger projects, and now we're hitting parks that, rather than taking us 10 weeks to work through the amount of beetle kill in that location, smaller jobs that are taking us a week or so. But we laid out a schedule in terms of the rate that we'll use the money. We have about 5 weeks left of the contractors for this year. It'll let us get into a few frozen areas, I hope, that are, I'm not sure they're classified wetlands, but we don't want to make a mess, and letting it freeze will be advantageous, and that'll wrap up the season, and we'll spend an equivalent amount next year.
So follow up to the municipal manager. I mean, we talked about the possibility of being creative about matching funds for Senator Murkowski's congressional directed spending. I don't want to use that verboten term. What's the status on that question?
Of where that money may come from?
Because remember, we discussed the possibility of utilizing the ARPA money and reappropriating it to the first responder payroll replacement, which would then free up that general fund revenue, which we could then apply to the beetle kill and use as match because it's taxpayer money, not federal money.
Right. I think through the discussions we've had internally, I don't think that's something that is necessarily because there was other complications and issues with doing that last time. I think there may be other revenue sources or places that we can look in 2023 that might be a lot easier to use. That's a conversation, though, I'd have to have more robustly with Courtney before we gave you a proposal. But we do have a couple ideas in mind.
I just want to make sure we get that 4 million as close.
Well, that is our goal.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baraniff. We will move on to IT and ask Mr. Dahl to come up. So for IT, what we'll see is the continuation level salaries and benefits adjustments. I think the next line is something that we've been waiting to see for a couple years now. With the go live of the CAMA software, we are now seeing the reduction of the previous software going out of service for us. So you're seeing the reduction of the 515,000 here. And then you'll see the reduction and the fleet adjustment for the department. Again, the realignment throughout the municipality. And we do not have any proposed changes for the IT department right now.
I think that I never really thought about the IT fleet. What does that mean?
IT has vehicles that, because they are responsible for going out to the facilities to do other, so like the permit center and everything, they have to go over there. And so we have fleet vehicles that they use to get to the other facilities. So they actually do have some fleet vehicles designated to their department.
So it's a portion of our broader fleet. They're not vehicles dedicated to the IT department.
I mean, they're encapsulated in our entire fleet, of vehicles, and the IT department does have some that are specifically for their department to utilize to get to other facilities to do the, software updates, the hardware changeovers and things like that. So
I've never seen a vehicle that says Municipality of Anchorage IT.
Oh,
Right.
it won't. I think it'll just say Municipality of Anchorage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because many of the departments are pretty dedicated vehicles. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yep. All right, so we will move on to their capital requests. We have the application service lifecycle and desktop lifecycle management, which are annual programs that they administer. And then the new one on this list is the SAP migration to the S4 Hana. And what that is going to be a large project, a large upgrade coming from SAP that is due in 2027. And basically this is a requirement of SAP. Otherwise we kind of enter into the area where we were with People Software. We will no longer have support of the software if this upgrade does not happen. So this is the kind of first, I would say, bite at the apple of funding what will be a very large upgrade that's coming in the next, 4 years.
Sounds like a good classic case of corporate extortion. How big of a project are we talking about from a revenue perspective, a cost perspective? If you say this is the first payment, are we talking 10 million?
Green. So this, we estimate it'll be about a $5 million project. What we're doing is mirroring what other states and other municipalities that were like size to Anchorage in the same state. What this is a major version from version 3 to version 4 of SAP. And it will require reviewing and reworking some of the customization code that was previously approved and implemented in SAP that'll have to be readdressed.
Is this a project that we're doing directly with SAP or with a third party?
To be determined. We are working with SAP. They will be an active partner. We've reworked that very strained relationship, and it is much healthier now. But we are reaching out to other entities, so it is not driven. SAP doesn't drive the bus.
Yeah, I think at some point before we get too deeply in bed with them, it might be wise to have a briefing with
Absolutely.
the body. It could be in a very close place so that we can understand the terms, because the first deal that was signed assigned all kinds of
Open-ended.
indemnification
Yes.
to SAP that was exploited pretty dramatically. And so it certainly raises a level of concern to me. Ms. Zalatel. Oh, Mr. Dunbar, then Ms. Zalatel.
Just very quickly, and you
Thank you.
probably said this and I just missed it. Could you say again, what is the revenue source? What is the other revenue source?
This would be a capital ask.
A what?
Capital ask. I need to have Courtney speak to this.
For the IT projects, we do short-term borrowing programs.
Okay, is it not the master lease program though? This is something else.
No, I believe it. Let me follow up with that because I think it might be, but I'm not sure. So let me follow up and
Okay,
see
the
if
point
it's
is
part of that.
it's not bond, it's not state or federal.
Yes.
Some other mechanism that we don't really use in other departments, right? This is unique to the IT department.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Might be wise at some point to have a place, maybe it's reflected in the budget binders, and I didn't notice that that's spelled out so that we can track what we're talking about. Others, pretty broad category. Ms. Zalatel.
Thanks. What's the timing on this? So I know you want to be able to start in 23, but like when in 23? Because I have a lot of concerns about how this might be. I understand it's required, or we end up in an obsolete, like on a path to being obsolete. But I have a lot of questions and concerns I would want to explore before we even get on the path. I'm really worried about payroll corrections again and kind of all the things that happened previously that were very costly. So what's the timing?
So the million here ask is to put that overarching plan together.
It's going to cost us $1 million to plan
Then-
for the upgrade?
No, it is a start.
Okay.
I would love to sit down in a detailed briefing to go over this. The assembly, the administration, and IT all have to be on the same page to commit to a very structured roadmap on this. And I would love to get into that detail.
Great. Question for municipal manager then. Is there an item that would come before us to like engage this projected potential spend?
Yes.
In the anticipation would be that would happen sometime in 23 if we were already planning on it, and then we would go through the route to get to that.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is going to be robust. I mean, to be able to go through this entire process, it is probably going to be significant cost. probably a few $1,000,000. So this is going to be something we're going to need a roadmap to. We're going to have to decide on how we're going to fund it, in what phases we can do it. And that's why dealing with IT is going to be so important. So we can structure how we come forward with those monetary asks. And then we also need on the back end, the staff or contractors to be able to implement it. So it's there's a lot of moving pieces to it, but absolutely the assembly will need to be involved, because you'll have to help us determine the funding mechanisms in order for us to implement the pieces of the puzzle.
Okay, yeah. And the reason I ask is, SAP outlived many terms on this body, just getting it up into a really functional state. So we really want to make sure that we have a full understanding, because I think it's something others will inherit in the future. Thank you.
I would argue for this project, there are on both sides of the table people who've been through the experience. And so I think probably caution is, we don't need to speak too hard to that, because everybody recognizes the reality. Okay, anyone else? Hearing none, let's move on.
Thank you, Mr. Dull. I will move on to Public Works and ask Mr. Wilbur to join us. And so for Public Works, we just have the continuation level salary adjustments, and there's no 2023 proposed budget changes. All right, we will move on to maintenance and operations. I think we'll have Trig Erickson, who is the acting maintenance and operations director, join us as well.
Before we move on,
Okay.
you can come on up, but so how do you achieve no budget changes in an environment where we have potentially 7 to 14% inflation?
So this is specifically just Public Works department itself. So maintenance and operations, project management and engineering, and traffic engineering are there
Sub.
all. Yep. So that's what
Okay.
we'll move on to is, so you'll see the next slide here is maintenance and operations. And then this is their, when you're talking about their inflation,
Okay,
that's
so
the,
we're literally just talking $208,000.
yes.
So strange then. So is that literally just one position and it's just the director?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, before we move on.
Ms. Salato.
So Mr. Wilbur's shifted positions to, I'm always going to say CEDC, and I know it's not that anymore. Is there someone in the acting Public Works right now? Because I see another newer face, so I'm just trying to get the order of operations.
This is not a new face. No, there is no one in the. I'm taking care of both right now. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm doing both right now.
A new face with us, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah, for those of you who don't know Trig is the division manager for the communications division inside maintenance and operations, one of the 5 divisions inside M&O, maintenance and operations. So
And to follow up, to go to the heart, I think, of what the question was, we do envision filling that Public Works Director position because right now Lance is effectively filling 3 roles, maybe 4 some days. And it's just the span of control is just too great for one person. So we do ask that that position be maintained. And it is my expectation in the near future, Lance will be recommending somebody to be promoted to that position.
All right.
Can I?
Yep. Miss
Yeah.
Quinn Davidson.
I'm going to ask another dumb question. Lance, can you, I'm losing track of where you are. So, and how Public Works relates to the larger thing that I also want to call CED. Do we not call it Economic and Community Development anymore? I thought we did.
Community development.
Oh, okay. Close. I'll just cut that. There's no economic development. I know that's not what you mean. Anyway, can you just clear it up for me?
yes, excellent question. So the community development department has multiple departments underneath it. One of those departments is the Department of Public Works, which includes traffic, project management, engineering, and maintenance and operations. So, and then similarly, also under community development is the planning department, real estate, development services, Public Works admin, and GIS.
And so the intent here is to hire a public works department well, not department, I don't know what you call that.
A department director.
Okay, it is a department, even though it has different departments within it. Okay, and then you would remain the community development director.
Yes.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Thanks.
Lance is just slowly and steadily checking off all of the boxes of every position within the municipality to inhabit. So you just can do a crosswalk, or there's a bingo card. So yeah.
Lance for mayor 2024.
Whoa.
Oh, I successfully pissed everyone. Probably Lance too.
Hey, look how red. For the record, Lance has turned very
He's
red.
handling it very well.
And all I was saying was he's done every job.
I will save Lance now. So for maintenance operations, again, we're going to see the reversal of a one-time item from 2022. The increase of the general obligation bond debt and the tax anticipation notes, the continuation labor adjustment for the staffing at maintenance and operations. There were some non-labor adjustments based on staffing adjustments that the department made throughout the year, and that's what that $60,000 represents. We're seeing increases in the public utility services, obviously with the rate increases across the utilities. We see that in our facilities as well. We are seeing increases in our facility contractual obligations. So we're showing that increase for $200,000. The fuel cost increase, this is for our snow hauling and snow plowing. Additionally, this is the realignment of the fleet adjustment. And then again, this is the pass-through of the roam tax, the portion that flows through the maintenance and operations department, which gets us to our continuation level changes. And then we're showing the voter-approved bond implementation from prior years in 21 and 22. We're showing a $53,000 increase for the small cell equipment installation. And this is actually offset by the revenue that we get from the applications for those small cell utilities, I guess. And then this is the Girdwood Board of Supervisors request for their road service area in the $90,000. So I will open it up for questions.
Mr. Dunbar.
So I think it's hard to say if it's here or if it's reflected in a different part of the budget. But so this is largely a continuation budget, as you've said. One of the things I heard most forcefully from my constituents this spring when I was door knocking was that they felt we should increase our investment in snow removal. And so, we've been having sort of ongoing discussions about what caused the sort of catastrophe this spring. Probably, could have been unusual freeze-thaw cycles, or maybe we have underinvested in certain areas. And so, insofar as we have some headroom right now under the tax cap, that I think if our constituents were asked, where would you like to see investment? I suspect that would be very near the top of the list. So what additional funds could be appropriated, or I should say, if you had additional money for snow removal, how could that most usefully be spent?
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, I think we would probably approach it in, and I'll verify this with our street maintenance superintendent, it would probably be in snow hauling, and it would likely be in sidewalk or some type of pedestrian cleanup there. I think, as maybe Ms. Peterson mentioned earlier, or maybe it was the manager, one of our challenges is that actually hiring operators.
Right.
So I will verify that with Mr. Van Landingham because he has a closer pulse.
So a follow-up, Mr. Chair. Two things, and Ms. Zoloto might want to mention this as well. I had thought that There was some AMATS funding for additional machinery to be purchased that we could use for sidewalk clearing. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page on there. And then when we talk about additional money for, say, snow hauling and sidewalk pedestrian cleanup, and I'm aware that might look like retention bonuses or something else to get those personnel you talk about. But regardless, what order of magnitude are we talking about here? Are we talking about 200,000? Are we talking about 4 million? Are we talking about somewhere in between? Like what kind of order of magnitude funds are we talking about?
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, I wouldn't want to guess. I can tell you that our snow haul budget, let me get you a better answer on the amount for those. The other thing I'd like to clarify is thanks to the support from AMATS, the snow removal equipment for sidewalks is not an expansion, it's a replacement, and we're going to be doing it in 3-year periods. So, and I think there's 14 or 16 of them that we're replacing.
Yeah,
so I'll verify that.
But often when we replace things, then they break less often, and so they're more available. So, but we need to have the staff for them, right? So, I guess I would love to hear more about that. Again, I think insofar as we want to go beyond a continuation budget at any point in this budget, I think snow removal is the place that my constituents have communicated to me is the place that they want to see that spent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Briefly.
Yeah, just Lance, if you provide information, will you send that to me too? That's a discussion that Forrest and I had offline that we were thinking about including in some sort of omnibus amendment. So I want to make sure to be in the loop too.
Results.
Thanks. So on that AMATS equipment replacement, it's not that the equipment just suddenly like keels over bad. And I see that we have in the tip $700,000, and I realize it covers a number of types of equipment, but 23 through 26, with 26 reducing down to $600,000. So, to Mr. Dunbar's point, it'd be interesting on how we could possibly leverage the opportunity with more equipment if we had the staffing, and then work to life cycle out the equipment over time. I think that's what I'm interested in seeing, if possible. And then I remember when we were emailing over the number of ice potholes this past spring, Mr. Wilbur, we talked a little bit about having a conversation around a strategic, like a little bit of a debrief, like what happened? Is it a one-off? Is it not a one-off? How can we better plan for it? And I think we have some runway on that, because I think the real issues will come up maybe more toward 1Q. What additional resources did you have to expend to try to deal with the number of community complaints? You guys were very responsive, or maintenance and operations was. But how can we make sure we are potentially ready? And if it doesn't happen, maybe it's money we don't need to spend, but I think we really taxed street maintenance this spring in a way that's probably not sustainable. So I would definitely be interested in that conversation.
Absolutely.
Mr. Volland.
Yeah, I just want to maybe third or fourth all of this. I think snow removal, especially from sidewalks, is a big priority for my district as well. And that was one of the things that I asked Desiree to add to our letter as a priority. Thanks.
Mr. Cross.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the small cell equipment installations on street lighting systems funded with application fees, is that the small cell equipment? Is that what controls the street lights? Is that what that is? And then can you explain that a little bit more to me?
Through the chair, Mr. Cross, excellent question. The small cell is actually from private carriers.
Okay.
And they mount them on our street poles, our street lights, and the street lights are managed inside maintenance and operations.
Okay. And so, but it shows that as a $53,000 expense, not income, if I'm reading that right. So I'm just wondering, so their application fees, and then those leases that they enter into, are those just year to year? Are they 3 or 5 year with escalation clauses for?
It's generally a year to year. It depends on the carrier. We have agreements with them. If they decide to take them out or not provide the service anymore, they have to remove them. We've been working with them for a couple of years to make sure that we get it right.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just kind of curious, because if they're year to year contracts, depending on mergers or what happens, then, that's whether or not that's sustainable or whether or not you can count on that next year really just depends on the market. So thank you.
So I'll take a slightly different tack here and say, yes, last year was an incredible snow phenomenon that was unprecedented, according to my conversations with everybody in the department. I think I heard nobody in 35 years has any memory of a winter that had that effect. And the department, for one of my neighbors, rigged a piece of equipment to achieve an outcome that needed to happen because she couldn't get out of her garage and the alley was narrow and they just made it happen. And it was extraordinary. And second, the sidewalk issue, it's necessary in particular for areas where people are highly pedestrian, and it just doesn't seem to be part of a plan. But I think we appropriated money to establish that plan, to kind of do some work just the other night so that we can begin to understand how to achieve deeper success. But I will again say, to the credit of this department, that we share responsibility with the state for sidewalk plowing. And on our main arterials, we do the east side of the road and they do the west side of the road. And all over this town, if you wanted to walk or ride your bike, you had to be on the west side of the road, because our team did its job and did it effectively and efficiently. And so, just to your credit and the teams that are doing that work, I'm grateful. And I just want to make sure that's part of the conversation.
Okay, and we will move on to the maintenance and operations capital budget. You'll notice that the bond proposal is inside of the A-Warn, and this is for the replacement of APD radios. This includes the replacement of 435 single band portable radios and 250 single band mobile radios for APD.
Ms. Zalatil.
Thanks. So the APD radio thing catches me off guard, but regardless, my understanding is we have a lot of deferred maintenance in our facilities. I'm wondering if there is a strategic plan for deferred maintenance, sequencing those projects in terms of both building life cycle, severity, code concerns. I do see some facility safety code upgrades. And if that plan exists, could it be shared? And if that plan doesn't exist, how can we get that reduced down into writing? It'd be something that could be occasionally reviewed, but I think it would give us better information about kind of what's the sequencing of these projects, especially if we consider any additional investments in other areas that might require ongoing maintenance and operations, because I think that's the ongoing tension.
Through the chair, Ms. Salatel, so we do have a plan. I think it's probably more just in the experience of the department, but one of the things that the assembly supported was a first quarter revision, that $25,000 that Ms. Peterson just mentioned. What that does is that creates and updates the software package that we have, and we have an inventory of all of our 164 plus facilities. We can tell how much time we spend in each one, how much money we're spending. So that gives us a sense of where our resources are being spent. We're also looking at the entire inventory on, their use and who's using them. So as that information becomes available, we certainly will share that with you.
Thank you. I mean, if that software can spit out a report, I think that would be really helpful, because I don't think that what's here captures the full magnitude, of course, of all of the maintenance and operations needs. And so I kind of want to be able to talk with the public in particular about what this investment does in terms of the overall conversation, because this is state monies, most of it. And our local money is only as to the air radio network infrastructure upgrade. So, because it kind of brings me back to the Sullivan line item that was a part of the community assistance. I mean, we were saying that a lot of that need was around FEMA, or not FEMA, sorry, I'm just giving you the punchline, around 2018 earthquake damage, but I didn't hear, and I failed to ask at the time, why did we seek FEMA for it, and why weren't we considering a facilities bond? And I don't still have really great clarity on that, so I'm just trying to reconcile what we use when to keep up with this kind of really giant responsibility we have.
One thing I think that when we look at facilities that we have to account for is the fact that maintenance cannot be bonded for. So when we talk to bond counsel and what we're allowed to do and what we can't is just regular maintenance on facilities is not an allowable bondable thing. It's kind of brick and mortar. We would have to be purchasing things, replacing a roof, those kind of significant things. So just regular maintenance on a building is not a bondable expense. And so just to keep in mind when we're talking about facilities, that's one of the challenges that we run into is that because we can't just bond for those maintenance things, we do need to come up with other funding options. I think that that's why you see some of the facility things as part of a state request and not a bond request.
So I'll ask for a definition of like because when we bond, we can also include M&O in it. So I guess I need that definition from bond counsel of what constitutes maintenance and operations, because I'm not having a meeting of the minds on that.
Yeah, so the O&M that is included on a bond is the voters approving us to increase the tax in order to accommodate the O&M of certain things. It's not actually us bonding for O&M. And so we can definitely work with bond counsel and get you a definition of what they consider to be a bondable asset, basically, and then what would not be.
I think that raises an interesting question I've never seen anywhere. And that is, do you have the ability to generate a report that shows the O&M available for X facility or Y facility, right? Because I don't know that since I've been on the body, ever heard us have a conversation about where those dollars are coming from and where they're allocated to. It's an exception to the tax cap that's granted by the taxpayer. But then do those funds get directed to that project? Does it become a pool? And so I think that probably is a really mind-bending exercise for somebody who likes spreadsheets. But if we can get there, that would be amazing to understand how that works. So I have a number of people in the queue, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Volland, and then Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wasn't sure exactly where to mention this, whether it was when Parks and Rec was here or right now. But the Mulcahy Stadium is a facility that is owned by the municipality, and it's been there for 50 years. And it's not only used by the Alaska Baseball League, it's also used by the high schools and the American Legion players as well. And so from April through August, it's a well-used facility. And so we're in the process of going to take a look at that and try to figure out where we should start with either remodeling or rebuilding some of that facility. And so we're going to meet there Monday, and we're going to start looking at that and see if we can come up with a plan for future maintenance and or projects. Thank you.
Through the chair, Mr. Peterson, if you, when you get a moment, take a look inside the capital improvement program. Take a look at that project called Chester Creek Sports Complex. It's specifically related to Mulcahy and the parking lot and making some adjustments to the Kaczynski fields because we're getting a lot more use in the ball fields in South Anchorage. So take a look at some of that project description and see if that's generally in line. And Parks and Rec and M&O, we can connect with you on your ideas. Chester Creek Sports Complex.
Thanks. And I don't know, I haven't seen the detail. I definitely see it here on the list for requests to the state. Did it incorporate some of the elements that were part of the previous bond proposal, the master plan that was developed for that area?
Through the chair, let me verify that. I think the design is 65% done, so they started from someplace out there. Find out where.
Oh, great. I think some of us, Pete and Member Ball and myself, would love a briefing on the master planning process. That sounds actually kind of exciting. Next in the queue, I have Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you. No, please don't. She was offering to get me. So I in the original ARPA request from the mayor's office, I believe you asked for 2.5 or maybe it was $3 million for Sullivan repairs. And then we provided in the general funds 1.75 million, I think, in repairs, or something around that. Desiree is shaking her head, so I might be a little bit off on the numbers, but it's in that, the point is there was a gap. And so repairs to me are not maintenance, right? You have to fix a roof, or you have to redo of something that's failed, the floodlights failed or whatever, or a ramp that was damaged in the earthquake. So I guess, why shouldn't we put a amount for the Sullivan on this bond? Is this the right place on the bond to put it under M&O? And how much would it be? Those are my questions for, I guess, for you, Lance, if you're comfortable.
Thank you. Bad practice. Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, let me verify with facilities. If there was an interest to do a bond, this is the place that it would be with M&O and facilities.
Okay.
And as it relates to the 1.7 compared to the earlier request, in the time frame in which the request was made initially to the administration back in April or May for ARPA, we were working on that. So we were making some improvements initially. So that's why the number basically went down from the amount that you supported last Tuesday night for the 1.7. So, but other improvements that might be necessary in there, I'll verify the list with facilities and get back with the administration.
What was your fund source? I do recall it now, about 700,000 in work. What ended up being your fund source for that?
Yeah, honestly, Mr. Dunbar, I don't know right now off the top of my head. I'm sure part of it was the regular operating dollars that they have in their regular budget. And so when they were doing that, they were not doing some other things in order to meet the needs inside the Sullivan, the immediate needs in the Sullivan. But I will, and they may have some other fund sources. I think we had some support when the original contract, the 22 budget included money for someone to manage the facility. Since the person that was managing the facility decided not to operate that, we used some of those resources to do the activities, particularly the maintenance activities that the contractor would have been responsible for. So we tapped into a little bit of those resources as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So one last item for me, and I don't know if it is bondable, but I'm in discussions with folks in the Fairview neighborhood. And I believe folks around Centennial as well are part of this conversation. And the conversation is, what are some restorations, reconstructions, improvements that we can figure out how to fund that will kind of repair some of the harms done by the mass sheltering we've done for the last 3 years that have had major impacts substantially in the areas surrounding where we've had mass populations. I think that there's two benefits from looking at that and thinking through some projects that will do that. The two-sided benefits are, A, it will undo the harms that have come inadvertently from these necessary steps. And two, it will help to assure the members of the public who might find similar or parallel uses in their neighborhoods that the municipality will make good on any potential damage that comes. And so I don't know whether that's bondable, whether that's grants or what, but I've also tasked the community council at Fairview, and I think Northeast should be thinking about this. They can help us to understand what some of those repairs might be, because the harms have not been insignificant because of these long-term uses. And again, these issues come from before this administration, but the harms we have to make good. So I don't know where that fits. It's a conversation that may be part of this conversation as we move to November 22nd, but it might also be further out on the arc of time.
All right. And we will thank Mr. Erickson for joining us, and and we will move on to project management and engineering. And you'll notice there's two continuation items on this. The slight reduction in the salaries and benefits just as the continuation of those personnel were adjusted. And then again, the fleet adjustment for the realignment vehicles inside of the municipality. And I'm guessing that you guys really just want to talk about their capital. So we will move on to their and you'll notice that there are 4 slides contained in project management and engineering. So I think we can kind of just make it an interactive conversation. I think I won't go through every single one of them just because it is a long list. So if there's anything specific that you guys want highlighted, or if there's projects that you're inquiring specifically about, or if Lance wants to highlight any specific. Lance would like to talk.
So just as a quick summary, while you're looking into this, so we have bond projects, state projects, and I want to kind of highlight some of those. So on the bonds, we're asking for, and this is just the PM&E, there'll be another $1.5 million in the traffic department. So this 31, it's about 34, 35 projects. Roughly 75% of them are for construction. We do try to get a blend like we do every year so that we have enough work moving, not only getting delivered, but also being teed up. This particular year, we're asking for a lot of state funds. There's roughly, I think, about a $200 million ask. The benefits of state grants are, I think, twofold. One of them is a significant portion of the projects that we're requesting for state funds are outside the ARTSA area. So there are projects that we normally couldn't bond for that would need funding. In particular, in Chugiak Eagle River, they have the ability to do complete projects or to leverage their resources to leverage the state funds. I think the mix is generally the same. There's a significant amount of construction. A lot of the projects are completely funded, designed through construction on the state funds. The bond projects, the large dollar number ones, for example, on this first slide, Dowling, the downtown lights in East 20th, those are construction. And sometimes the other ones are a blend of construction and design. And then the last comment I'll make is in September, we reached out to the Anchorage delegation, all of the in Anchorage and Eagle River and Girdwood, and invited them allow us to take them on a tour of their district. So those that took us up on that offer, we took them around their district and showed them the things and the challenges that we see inside their district, put together a small packet. And the reason that we did that is knowing that the administration would likely be asking the state for a large sum for transportation improvement. So we got them very familiar with the things that our street maintenance challenges that we have, the drainage problems that we have, and in some locations where we can't make improvements, we can't replace bridges just because they're outside of our area. So hopefully that effort as well in sort of preparatory ourselves for the state request, it's a pretty healthy request, but the program generally for the bonds is pretty similar to what we've done in the past. For those of you who don't know Russ Oswald, Russ is a lead project manager, works with Kent. He and Melinda Sue kind of tag team that, but Russ has a lot of familiarity with these projects, and many of our projects are managed under term contractor, which Russ manages as well. So if you have particulars on these or other projects that are not on the list, we can either answer those or get back to you.
Sure. Since she hasn't spoken, Ms. Aller can go first.
Lance, what did we get last year from the state?
I believe last year we did not receive any resources from the road. Our only request was for the port, and it was 200 million.
That was the only thing we did receive? Okay.
There wasn't in our legislative package. We also had some bridges. So the state did give us Ruane Road down in Girdwood. So we did have some other capital that the state did give us. But one thing I would like to point out for the assembly, we are having discussions now, and you'll see it reflected when you get to page 36 of the slide deck, that there was a time when the state used to give us, I think it was somewhere near $30 million for surface repaving. And so we were able for surface rehabilitation of roads, we were able to spread that money across all the different districts to upkeep some of these roads. That money they kind of stopped with that strategy, but we're trying to get them to go back to that strategy. What you'll see up there on the slide right now is when you see Senate districts E, F, G, this was a big push because if we can help with some of this maintenance of these roads, it'll be significant for the neighborhoods, especially some of the neighborhoods that you drive through and you see major dilapidation that's going on, if we can keep up with it on a more routine basis. So we're going to be making a real push for the state to start investing in some of their districts. We think that was a good program and we hope they restart it.
Are you done?
You done, Jamie? Okay. Great. Yeah. So a couple questions. One, it's funny, Senator Gray Jackson, there's a constituent who's asking for some resurfacing, et cetera, on Forest Park. And LV said, oh, why don't you ask the state, put it in your legislative request? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you guys never give us anything. That's sort of a pipe dream. But it looks like we are moving toward that. Is this because they have a bunch of infrastructure money or a bunch of ARPA money, or what is this money? Like, what makes us believe they're going to do this since they haven't recently?
I will take that. I think we've seen a lot of interest from a lot of legislators. A huge propensity of them come from Anchorage, and we've seen an interest from a lot of legislators. I think it's because they're getting constituent concerns or complaints about roads, or I want this fixed, I want that fixed. We saw this as a very valuable and effective program when the state did it before, and we do believe that there is a political will. Or there will be a political will to potentially reinvigorate this program.
But it's got to be that, I think they've wanted to do it for years. It's just that they don't have any money. So is it just that they have money now? And is that just the general money they have that allowed them to increase community assistance, et cetera? Or is it directly from federal programs?
I can't speak to that, but the conversations I've had with legislators, they believe that they can refocus some of their resources towards basic maintenance.
Yeah, that would be great if they'll do that. Okay, thanks. And then my other question is, can we please, I think in past years, we've had this proposal put in a map format so we can see how it spreads out over the district. I didn't see that in the binder.
I think in the front of your capital binders,
Oh.
there's a map.
Oh, in the capital binder, it's in a different, okay.
Yep, I actually see Mr. Constance
it.
right now.
Here, I thought it was so good. I actually skimmed all the way through PM&E and couldn't find it. Okay, thank you.
So I have myself in the queue, and I noticed there's a guy sitting behind the pole over there in a bright yellow jacket, Mr. Coy. If you might come up briefly for this, it's kind of a joint conversation with traffic and PM&E.
What did he bike over? Yes.
His
That's amazing. Way to live your.
Yeah, he lives his values.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit of a hot seat, but Mr. Vollen and I have been having a number of conversations about ways we could make Anchorage safer for bikers. And what I would like to ask, and I don't know how we achieve this in this plan of projects, having the traffic engineer here, but is a commitment, setting a policy and a commitment to achieve one protected bike lane in Anchorage in the next year, or at least planned in the next year so that it goes into construction in the short-term future. So between the two of you and the manager and us, do you think we could move us to the point where we establish the first protected bike lane in Anchorage?
So I'm going to help the traffic engineer with this question. We'd be certainly happy to entertain that conversation, Mr. Constant.
Yep.
Are you talking about all of Anchorage or one specific area?
One single protected bike lane in Anchorage so that we can prove to the state and AMATs and everyone who's
It can be
concerned
done.
that it can be done, and that we can provide some hope to the people who bike in this town that we're actually making progress towards the goal of a safer roadway.
I think the traffic engineer and I think the community development director, I think all of us are very excited about this prospect of having this conversation. So I'll just turn it back over to Lance and he can comment further.
I'll just have you look at page 36 and Patterson Street bike lanes. And that's a project that's been ongoing for a lot of years. Actually, it's been going, but it is planned to upgrade Patterson Street from the southern portion where the trail comes out, kind of connects it to the I'm trying to think of the name of this elementary school right there.
So I don't see that on page 36. Okay.
Patterson Safety Rehab, no, Patterson Pedestrian Safety, Patterson Street Bike Lanes, DeBar Road to Chester Creek. So anyhow, so from DeBar all the way over to Chester Creek where the trail comes out from the neighborhood, winding through the neighborhood, there'll be a sidewalk upgrades and a protected bike lane.
And so when we say protected bike lane, we are not talking about green paint, right?
No, but I am talking about striping and modifying it similar to what was done on 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, yes. That's a bike lane, 10th Avenue is.
So protected bike lanes are somewhat different. That's a bike boulevard.
Right.
And it's a concept and it's a good one, but it's still pretty high risk if you're a soft shelled creature amidst a stream of hard shelled vehicles.
It is. I'm well aware of that. I ride them virtually
Hold on.
every day.
Let's say again.
So I said I'm well aware of that. I ride them virtually every day.
Excellent.
So I know the difference, and I will say that if you're a commuter, my opinion is that the bike lanes, the stripe lanes, are more efficient than the off road lanes for commuting through an area.
Can I get in on
And I
this?
think that's been proven time and time again by different bike agencies that I've read.
So
It looks like we'll probably need a briefing on this separate from this meeting.
What I would love to do at some point is have a work session with Bike Anchorage where we look at some designs, what different options for bike lanes could be. And what I would love to see is separated or protected bike lanes, not just sharrows. A couple of us were in New York recently and we got to check out the city bikes and rode them all around Central Park and up to Harlem and back. And the way they have their bike lanes in New York was pretty awesome. I felt safe. It was a great way to explore the city. They just had row parking separate the bike lanes from the vehicle traffic. And they had a little bit of extra room for doors to open, loading in and out of the vehicles. I know that snow removal can be a thing that's often brought up as at least a perceived challenge. I don't necessarily think that it's not a challenge that we could tackle. And I think we should be thinking innovatively rather than maybe why we can't do something. But protected bike lanes. So I'm taking it on this Patterson Street bike lanes. That's just kind of the paint. That's not anything separated or protected.
That is true.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, I would just
hold on. I had the floor. I rolled around
sorry, go
this
ahead.
and give up the floor. So between us all, I would like to move toward a kind of conversation. It might not be in this budget cycle of actually finding and defining and creating the first actual protected bike lane in this town. And so I'm just putting a marker on the table here that this is important. We have the traffic planner, we have project management engineering, we have the executive branch and the legislative branch, and a shared idea. And so I don't know how we get there, but thank you. Now, Mr. Bolland is in the queue.
Thank you very much. The other thing I wanted to bring up is we have a couple of members, and I apologize in advance. It's my first time going through this process, so if I sound dumb asking this, I bear with me. Give me grace. Yeah, but there's
Special seating.
There are a few of us members, myself, Member Cross, and Member Solt, who have joined forces to do a working group with ASD on a safe routes to schools group. And Heather Philp from their Safe Student Transportation Committee sort of sent us a short list of what they've identified as some of the more dangerous crossings. So I have 4 I'll just kind of throw out there on the record for now. I don't really know if this is something that applies to a PM&E capital project, but Victor Road at 100th by Mears Middle School, Tudor Road at Baxter Road, Benny Benson, O'Malley Road at Rockridge, and then Ocean View Elementary, Johns Road. So I think those locations may be of note, something that we would potentially want to support looking at in the future.
Yeah, some of these locations, just to add what Dan said in this working group, they're more complicated because they involve state roads. Some of them are crossings, and we're limited on what we can use. But however, you have situations where the speed limit is 50 miles per hour. There's no designated bike lane, and it's adjacent right to a school where kids are walking to school. And we have that in Eagle River as well as Ravenwood. Just that those are still at the top just because they've had instances where they had either, where there was accidents and there's people harmed. And so they're taking the ones so it'd be interesting on, what that looks like and what we can contribute to the safety of our students in light of the new challenges we're facing with a shortage of school bus operators. And I think, and that's going to continue into the future. So thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, wait, add Mr. Dunbar. Okay, Ms. Alto next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the map, there is item R20, traffic calming and safety improvements. But then I was looking at the list and I couldn't find it. So can you point to me on the list of projects where it is and how much it is?
Well, once we get through project management engineering, we're going to bring Mr. Coy back up. And we're going to talk about traffic calming and some of the projects that Mr. Boland and Mr. Cross just mentioned.
There it is. So it's, 500,000. Okay. I'll wait for that point. Thank you.
Ms. Alto.
Thanks. I have a couple of really specific questions. We've had an ongoing drainage issue at Pokey Circle, and I've been working really close with Kent Kohlheis on that. I don't see that mentioned here. However, there is a drainage project, and we are looking towards spring, possibly for a solution. Is that needing bond money, or is that covered by something existing?
Kent has programmed some of his discretionary funds to address that. We are designing it in-house. I think you have been shown a preliminary design earlier. Is it?
Maybe. I don't quite remember, but I wanted to make sure it was taken care of.
It is being planned. I'm the manager for that job, and I looked at their latest plans for it just last week.
Okay, and then the 42nd Avenue, like Otis to Florina Street, is that actual construction? Like that's going to go if this bond passes, or are we still in?
No, we are in right-of-way acquisition stage. Will be the next and final stage. We have the full road designed, both phases to 65% right now, and so this will allow us to finalize the design for the first phase, which is being done jointly with AWWU, while they upgrade their trunk line through there. And then allow us to get the right-of-way acquisition. And then we've also added a storm drain line on one of the south small streets.
Great, glad to hear that. So that will have to be bonded for next year to go into construction?
That's true. And we'll be taking part of these funds to go with that as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
Because I expect that will be a pretty large price tag on that reconstruction project.
That will be when you combine it with the AWW portion that we're estimating today, around $6 million.
Okay, just a couple more, and my apologies. The ARTSA sound barrier / retaining wall replacement, where is that?
Those are multiple areas throughout town, and we have a lot of sound barrier fences that were built out of wood way back when, and they're just starting to decay. And we get calls that this panel fell or that panel fell, and we have to replace whole sections at the time, because you go out, if one panel failed, then likely 20 more need to be replaced at the same time. So we do them all over town.
And
we did a section along Northern Lights this past year, and we're just
okay.
in anticipation of that.
And are those along both municipal and state corridors, or just municipal corridors?
We are focusing on the municipal corridors at this point.
And
there are some along state corridors, though, that the responsibility is ours, which was because we asked for it when it was built, and we have an agreement with the state that we have to pay for the maintenance and upgrade.
Okay, I'll be getting with you offline about how we might be able to add one, if that's possible, or
Right.
if that would be allowable. And then the final question is, there is a pavement program in here. How does that intersect with the AMAT's pavement replacement program? Because over the course of, each year, AMAT's pavement replacement, is in, up to $20 million some years. So I just would need to know kind of where those intersect.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. The pavement replacement program it used to be our old recycled asphalt rehab program that our maintenance department used to do. Now we just call it a pavement rehab, that our maintenance department goes in and they will fix like small portions of alleys or small side streets that have never been paved, or correct that issue. And that's how we use those funds.
Do you guys keep like a running list so we can make sure that we're not duplicating? Because the pavement replacement and AMATs is any policy committee member or DOT or someone can throw things on that list. We want to make sure we're not trying to duplicate efforts.
We do, and it's surprising how sometimes unexpectedly one of our roads that we've been working on will show on that list.
Okay.
And then we'll have to back it out of our list.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh yeah, Ms. Hellard. Thank you.
So on the pavement rehabilitation, Senate District, we are L, I think. Eagle River's L now. Yeah, we're left off that. And I'm just kind of curious, maybe you could fill in why. I mean, it might be because we have Subursa. But I mean, just curious.
Subursa has a line in there.
Through the chair, Ms. Allard, the answer to your question is these are the projects that would be inside the ARTSA service area, particularly as they relate to bonds. That would not be the case for the state. The Chugiak, I think, I can't remember if I saw it in here on this page. If you look at the top of page 34, there's a CBURSA residential pavement rehabilitation. It's a $3 million state grant ask. It's very much similar to the one Russ just described. It would just be in Chugiak, Eagle River, and supported with state funds.
Oh, I realized there was an item I didn't ask about on the previous presentation, and maybe we can save it till the end so I don't take us backwards, but it might be something pretty simple to answer. And that's relating to code enforcement, code abatement, and funds to help clean up issues, whether it's mold, whether it's buildings that are piled up with trash. Did we have a plan this year for making an increase? The question, we can take it now, keep proceeding, and come back to it. It's your call.
Through the chair, let me get back to you because I want to verify. I want to check with facilities. I think that if they do have that problem, we know where it is. And we're talking about properties that we own.
No, I'm talking about properties across the municipality. I'm aware of one property where we might have 50 people become homeless because the landlord is a slumlord and there's mold all over the property and people are going to the hospital. Code enforcement wants to deal with it, but they don't have money.
So code enforcement will be under development services when we get to them, but
Or maybe it's abatement or management. I don't know. So
still under development
okay,
services.
good.
We'll get to
come
that.
Thank you. Sorry to distract. Go ahead.
All right, so I think we have finished with PM&E, and we will ask the traffic engineer to come join us again as we go through the traffic engineering department. So we have a slight decrease in the debt service related to the general obligation bonds under traffic engineering. The continuation level salary and benefits adjustments for traffic engineering, along with the increased cost for paint and sign materials for them to continue their work, and the fleet adjustment across the municipality again that we've been seeing in the other departments. The one thing that we do have for them is you'll see a transfer, and this is a transfer of a position from the planning department to the traffic department. So when we get to planning, you'll notice the same reduction on their side. So it's just a movement of this engineering tech position from the planning department to the traffic and engineering department. So it's not increasing the overall PCNs of the municipality. It's just a movement across departments.
Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. So I recently emailed Mr. Coy about the idea of bus right-of-way being something within the municipality. Within your current staff, do you have the capacity to deep dive on that potentially?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Zalatel. One question that I have on that is that could mean lots of things. It could mean right away like a bus rapid transit. It could mean right away like signal preemption. It could mean a bus only lane. So I wasn't quite sure. We did have some internal discussions, and I think I sent an email back asking that question.
And I guess my question is now kind of based off of that feedback I got from you, you all might be the experts working with Miss Acton at People Mover. Do you have the capacity to look at like what the possibilities might be, to have that conversation, and maybe at some point we could have a recommendation one way or the other? Because I'm not an expert. I don't think you want me picking the potential model for bus right of way.
Right. So I would push that to the transit department. That's definitely more up their alley as they're looking at planning. So I can follow up with Jamie when she's back in town, and Bart Rudolph would be the staff person, and we can see what their thoughts might be. I do recall that there have been some discussions about the signal preemption, and I think bus only lane has come up. Maybe that was more HOV sort of related, high occupancy vehicle lane that could be a bus lane, but I think it's more on transit, and I think they have plans where they could look at that a little bit more.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? So I'll just reiterate, you were at the table, but we want to have a conversation meaningfully about how we achieve Anchorage's first protected bike lane. So we'll get there. Thank you. I think we're ready to move on.
And actually, they do have a capital slide, so we do have access to Mr. Coy a little bit longer. So they do have 3 annual programs that we are including: the school zone safety, the traffic calming and safety improvements, and the Anchorage signal system signage and safety improvements.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe, so in addition to snow removal, the number one thing I have heard when I go door knocking, which I've been basically doing nonstop since September of last year, but this spring when I was doing the municipal door knocking, traffic calming obviously is the other thing people just constantly, they want speed bumps usually, sometimes other kind of improvements. I believe for the last 2 years, we've had $1 million on the bond for traffic calming safety improvements. If we increased it to $1 million, could you spend that effectively? And I'll say that there's 500,000 in here from the state. We have traditionally, I say traditionally, for my time on the assembly, we have treated all state grant requests as illusory. That is, they are not real. They are something we'd like to have, but we're never going to get. Maybe this is the year that changes. Hopefully it is. But again, my question is, if you don't get the 500,000 from the state, well, I guess the answer is right. The answer is right here. If you've asked for $1 million, just 500 from the 1,000 from the state, 500,000 from the bond. So I guess I don't have a question so much as a comment. I might run an amendment to increase that amount to $1 million, because I know our communities want it, and I'm skeptical that we will get that money from the state. So that's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, I think one thing I would like to just bring as a reminder to the Assembly, we were fortunate enough, the municipality was fortunate enough to receive a significant state grant this year for traffic calming. And I think a part of that is in Northeast Anchorage, and Mr. Coy has been working to put that state grant funds in place. So I think that might also be one of the reasons why, we want to make sure that we are asking for what we can deliver. But Mr. Coy can share with you kind of what we're doing with that state grants and what we might have planned for these funds.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, so
Could you speak a little more into your microphone, a little louder, Mr. Coy?
The state grant is for Northeast Anchorage area, and we do have traffic calming roads that we've identified that are eligible for traffic calming in that area. Given that the grant specifically calls out various roads, what we've decided to do, rather than moving forward with just funding some projects that are already kind of in the process of being funded through the bond funds, is that we're doing a more comprehensive look at all the roads that were requested to see which ones of those qualify, so we can update our qualified streets list. Typically how we do our traffic calming is, as a community member requests traffic calming on their street, we request that they go to their community council and write a resolution that shows support from the community for that to be studied as a street. And then after we get that resolution, we'll go do a traffic study and see what the speeds are. We look at are the speeds high enough that they put it into a high priority location and we come up with a qualified list versus a list of those that did not qualify. And so right now with the state grant, we are finding out throughout that area where it was focused, are there more qualified streets? And based on that, we will then see which ones are the highest priority, have the most need, and have solutions that can install additional speed humps, speed cushions, speed feedback signs. And so our hope is that we will identify a few and be able to then use those funds to install additional speed humps in those areas.
One quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So I understand sort of the general process that you use, but this goes to a point Mr. Vol and Mr. Cross made. Because of East Anchorage's density, a lot of our roads, even roads that don't seem super busy and maybe don't get the same speeds or volumes, they are near schools. And Apollo Drive is one that kind of sticks in my mind. It's just down the road from Scenic Park Elementary or Scenic Valley Elementary School. And there was a kid hit there a few months ago. And obviously members of the community reached out to me about that. I don't believe that they were seriously injured or they certainly lived. So, but my point is this, I know that you have this traditional way of doing it. It's speed, it's volume, but do you also take into account proximity to schools, or that is on maybe not a quote unquote official safe route to school, but lots and lots of kids in East Anchorage walk to school. And I just want to make sure that you are taking account of that when you do these studies.
Yes. So typically that definitely weighs into the priority. So of all those that do qualify when it's near school, it has those concerns. And in fact, Apollo Drive is one that we are currently looking at. We have allocated some of the prior bonds to do design. And that's one of the ones, in talking with my traffic calming staff, that is looking at funding a speed cushion next year or the year after. So that one's in the works. And we do have a few of those that you've mentioned that are in the works. And I'd be happy to talk more if you have questions later.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It's interesting too. Some of those nominations from community councils I know are cold because maybe they don't meet the 85th percentile rule or some of the criteria. And I'm curious about some of those criteria and why those projects may never move on, despite the fact that they've been asked for by the community. And I think that is probably something that maybe this body could use some education on at some point. Moving on from that, my question is about the school zone safety component here. Are there a specific list of projects that you've identified? And I wonder if any of them are from the list that I just read that the ASD group has identified.
Let's see. So some of the ones that are school zone safety that are upcoming: Chinook, Wonder Park, Chester Valley. That project actually has been bid and is intended.
I think we
for
had that on our
construction.
agenda on Tuesday, actually, that piece.
Okay. So I think the ones that ASD that Heather Phil, I was on that email that she listed a few, and we had discussed at the ASD Assembly work session. So those ones are not, those are still trying to figure out what to do.
Okay.
So there's no specific projects for those that have been identified.
Is there a way that we can get an idea of what to do? Is there a study that needs to happen, or where do we go from here on those items?
I think on those, studies have been done, and the challenges with a lot of the traffic things is there's things that we can do, but will they actually have effectiveness that we hope? We can put lots of signs up, for example, and we're asked to put lots of signs up, but often there's already lots of signs and people still aren't observing those signs. And so the question is, do you do something different, and how best to do it? And so So I would have to look specifically at that list and
Mhm.
kind of talk you through each one, and it probably would take a little bit longer than what we would want to go in through right now.
Sure.
But
I guess just one of my hopes from that working group, and just so everybody knows, Brad is part of that working group and attended our first meeting, which I greatly appreciate. But I hope that working group is productive, and I think one of the ideas behind it is that the assembly potentially could help get projects funded to support safety for our students who are walking or cycling to school. And so, yeah, I think the more guidance that we have about moving those already identified, maybe problem areas or challenging areas forward, the better, because I'm looking at things that we could bond for. So, yeah, thank you.
So, other questions? All right, Ms. Zolotel says we can skip her. There's lots to be done. I think, Mr. Coy, the answer to your question is long-term planning, short-term planning, roads that lend themselves to driving the speeds that are safe, as opposed to signs and endless signs and more signs. When I think of the perfect definition of that problem at C Street coming into town, like as you pull up towards like 15th and past 15th, you get to 13th and like every 10 feet there's a no parking and slow down sign, and it's noise and it does zero good. Nobody sees any of it. And so, but you have a narrower road, a road with bulb outs or other functions that actually make it so that people look and they're like, well, I better slow down. Those are the things that work. And so some of this is short term, some of this is maybe more long term. Thank you.
We have all earned ourselves a break.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be 15, but if we can just take 10, since we're a little bit behind, and then, hopefully we can finish up the last of the departments.
I'm
in our
sure building
remaining-
and development services will be fast.
Yeah.